Hello everyone. My name is Kuniko Muramoto from Ritsumeikan University. Today, I would like to talk about the power of land, folktales and resilience in the aftermath of Tohoku earthquake. Introduction. As a clinical psychologist concerned with trauma among women and children for more than 30 years, I have increasingly realized the importance of ecological perspectives. After Tohoku earthquake on March 11, 2011, I launched a project to be a witness to the disaster and recovery by visiting annually to 4 affected prefectures in Tohoku district. A keyword then was resilience. In listening to what the affected people said, I was always impressed by their view of life and death. While it is still said that the disaster was unprecedented or unexpected, this is not necessarily the case. I knew that it was part of their historical knowledge inherited by their older generations, one after another. A special exhibition on the 1896 Tsunami had been held at the Ryasu Art Museum in Kesenuma 5 years before the disaster. Its underlying concept was that, while it is impossible to make tsunamis occur, a proper understanding of their history leads to the development of a culture that prevents them from causing major disasters. The power of land in my designation refers to the power fostered by nature, culture, and history in each region over the course of time, and includes as its basic element people's resilience against disaster. My 10th annual visit of the affected areas provided a large amount of ethnographic material. Lisman means by ethnography text about text that can be edited in the form of narratives. Just like interview data, I reorganized the collected ethnographical material into short separated stories. In July 2011, just 4 months after the disaster, the 7th Miyagi Folktale School was held at a hotel in Miyagi Prefecture. This hotel facing the sea was struck by the tsunami, but the building itself remained intact because of its location on a sturdy rocky hill. Immediately after the disaster, it hosted 600 townspeople and volunteers and functioned as a long-time base for local reconstruction. The event, telling the stories of 3/11, hearing voices of the voiceless and engraving forms of the formless, attracted 200 people from all over Japan. Shuichi Kawashima, a folklorist, delivered a keynote speech on tsunami and narratives. Long time ago, he had heard a survivor of the 1933 tsunami told her experience and was impressed by her joy of being listened. Realizing the importance of sharing disaster experience by storytelling, he pointed out the existence of many books, stone monuments, and other items telling past tsunami experiences. He also noted legend reflecting a belief shared by fishermen on a big catch of fish followed by a tsunami, causing the interchange of sea creatures and human beings. He quoted a fisherman's words, "We owe our wealth to the sea. The tsunami deprived us of it, but will hopefully give back to us." In short, Kawashima conveyed us fishermen's wisdom of living with the sea. The tsunami deprived Kawashima of his mother, his house, and a vast amount of valuable ethnographic materials. The reason for his acceptance of the invitation to give a speech, was the location of the hotel as a site of the event. In Tohoku, there are kujiyose or mediums. It is believed that telling a story is a memorial service for the dead, and it is always held at a specific place where the spirits dwell. In the case of this event, it was the sea which the hotel faces. Kawashima concluded his talk by saying, "I am sure that the spirits of those who died in that tsunami will be glad to hear the tsunami storytelling at this place today." The purpose of this gathering was to have each person tell his or her story of that day as it really was, to listen to it with our whole body and soul, and to share it with each other. 6 members of folktale groups who suffered from the tsunami shared their experiences of the disaster. Aishoji, living in Yamamoto town, was swept away by the tsunami on the 2nd floor of her house to which she had fled and spent one night there. When the tsunami started to move her house, there was no cloud in her mind, and she said to herself, "This is the end of my life. There is nothing to regret in it." How good it is to have lived with folktales in my later years. She remembered the folktales of tsunamis told by people long ago. Caught on the balcony of the house being washed away, she saw the landscape shifting and felt the strange presence of ancestors, brothers, friends, and many others accompanying her. Tsunami caught up with Yoshio Suzuki, another storyteller in Yuriage town, just as he entered the shelter building. When he turned around, he saw his wife riding the wave and waving her hand at him with nonchalant countenance. He too was caught in the wave and rolled around, but was saved. After the event, he said, "The idea of talking about my wife in front of so many people at first daunted me. But the audience seemingly wanted me to give them half of my sorrow, and listened attentively to me, which cheered me up. I really wanted to be present at the event, but I relived it through the booklet and the film. All of the stories were magnificent, and their narrations were powerful, sometimes humorous. They even made me feel like listening to a folk tale." Activities of collecting and preserving local folk tales and folklore in Tohoku began in the 1970s, and a loose network was formed. The Yamamoto Folktales Society started in 1998 with 16 members under the slogan of carrying on the tradition of folktales. Yamamoto town was severely damaged by the tsunami. 60% of the town was submerged. A member of the society died, and there is nobody whose family members, friends, or houses were not swept away. Further, the evacuation scattered people. Those members who survived were glad to be alive at first, but as news of the deaths of those close to them arrived day by day, they came to be overcome by grief, feeling the loss of everything. However, a member remembered folk tales left for her when her fellow came to visit and gave her a tearful hug. Folk tales helped her get strength to revive from the disaster. In May 2011, 6 members gathered to talk about their experiences of the disaster. People in Yamamoto town believed that the tsunami would never hit the area beyond the Joban railway line, but it did, and as a result, not a few people failed to escape from it. However, Yamamoto town had, in fact, folk tales of tsunamis came over the Joban line. According to the ancestors, the folk tales have their own roots. What they have conveyed is not imaginary, but real, connected to a specific land and a specific person. The members regretted that they had not done a good enough job of telling them to the people to decrease the number of victims. Folk tales are educational legacies as the ancestors' gift. With a sense of mission, the over 80-year-old members began visiting shelters and interviewing local residents about their experiences in the tsunami. Surprisingly, within a year, 3 booklets of their experiences were compiled and combined into a book by a major publishing company in March 2013. This book, which includes the testimonies of about 70 townspeople, vividly shows what happened in Yamamoto town in the year following the disaster. Traditional culture, religious institutions, festivals, and the fishing and farming industries became a kind of device for people to mourn their loss together, to encourage each other, and proactively to move toward recovery, involving stakeholders and supporters from across the country. In March 2018, an event was held to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Yamamoto Folktales Society. 6 witnesses in the book read their own stories. The audience of nearly 200 people listened attentively to the witnesses and became one in mind. I was part of them. At the opening of the event, a kagura, ancient Shinto music and dancing, performed by children of Sakamoto Elementary School. The next day, there was handmade kamishibai, a picture story show about the history and disaster experience of Nakahama Elementary School, whose school children could all survive by taking shelter in a warehouse on the roof. This school building is now designated as a disaster remains, and the audience knew that the school had been integrated into Sakamoto Elementary School and that the opening children's kagura performance had integrated the Nakahama area version. The creation of a new culture was taking place after the disaster. Finally, a man from a local group stood up in a reserved manner to express his gratitude for the donation by the Yamamoto Folktales Society to install the memorial bell. The letter's reader simply replied, "That's a reminder of the royalties from the book, which we edited by collecting precious testimonies of our people minus expenses." We witnessed how the whole town has been creating its own tsunami culture despite hardship. After the disaster, folktale associations in Tohoku, which had been formed a loose network, kept in touch to confirm their survival, and the members supported each other and mourned their loss together. The earthquake revitalized these activities. Small folktale societies in affected regions walked around for listening to experiences of the disaster and published a series of recordings. Various events were planned and inspired young artists from all over Japan to the creation of voice archives and films and artworks one after another. Ryusuke Hamaguchi, the 2022 Academy Award-winning film director, is one of these artists. Thinkers as well were inspired to deepen their thought on storytelling and listening, and published books. Kazuko Ono, the leader of the Miyagi Folktale Society, says, Despite our enlightening activities on the value of folktales, few people have paid attention to them. When a major landslide occurred and many people were sent across the sea, however, a new light began to be shed on them, as if they were reborn. Now to the conclusion. Disasters are an integral part of human history. From the time immemorial, humans have always suffered loss and hardship. Moving forward to the future, however, they have passed on their historical memories to the next generations in the form of culture. It seems as if the power of land had been fostered by nature, culture, and history of each land, nurturing its inhabitants' ability to survive disasters. Folktales are stories of people rooted in the land, and contain laughter, humor, and glimmer of hope, along with the misfortunes, suffering, unreasonableness, and absurdity experienced by our ancestors. Lando and Saul argue that community recovery depends on the collective telling of stories about the community's experiences and reactions. And this is precisely what has been happening in Yamamoto town, where the creation of culture and history have taken place in various ways, involving people from across Japan. This is precisely the kind of storytelling that has occurred after the disaster in Tohoku district. For people living in these traditional land-based communities, a psychology that assumes that similar stimuli will produce similar results, regardless of time or space, does not fit. Trauma-based interventions administered to segregated individuals as a unit may be rather detrimental. Nevertheless, PTSD and trauma narratives have penetrated even small villages in Tohoku. Despite criticisms that trauma theory and post-disaster interventions in Western style have had a negative impact on communal cultures, mental health globalization like a tsunami seems to be unavoidable. What is needed now is to consider the possibility of community psychological support that contributes without undermining the power of land, and to envision a psychology that portrays what emerges in relationships, not clear-cut individuals. Here are references. Thank you for your attention.